Founded by Mother Ann Lee when she came across the Atlantic in 1774, they were called Shakers because of their quivering dances in which the spirit seized them. They believed in complete sexual equality and hoped to restore the primitive Christian church on American soil with its stress on community, celibacy, and the indwelling spirit of Christ. Unlike the Amish, the Shakers did believe in innovation. They invented the washing machine, the flat broom, and stay-pressed clothes, among other things, because labour-saving devices left you more time to pray. They embraced the new, they equated it with piety, and they sought it in design.
I think that in order to explain why, and I say this with modesty, why the Shakers have made such beautiful, beautiful things is due to the mottos that we have been given to live by. The first, of course, is hands to work and hearts to God. And this is literally lived out in Shaker communities. And the other is, do all of your work as though you were going to live 1,000 years and yet as though you were going to die tomorrow. And when I go through the museum, which I still do occasionally, and I see these beautiful, beautiful things that are there, I think, when people made these things, they didn't make them thinking they're going to be in a museum. They didn't make them and put them in a museum. They made them so well, and they made them well because they integrated their religion into it. I'm convinced that religion and work has gone, and hopefully continues to go, hand in hand with Shaker arts, crafts.
People talk about a Shaker style, but really I guess the fundamental question is use, isn't it? It's what the thing is used for that dictates how it's going to look.
Exactly. Form indeed does follow function for a Shaker. And so we had many, many things here that have really stood the test of time for several reasons. One, A, they were made well, and second of all, they've always been used well. And although the pieces in our museum, like this tailor's bunk...
Tailor's bunk?
Bunk. Yeah,
what, this a tailor slept on it?
Well, no, actually, it's just good old Maine country terms. It's spelled B-E-N-C-H, but it's pronounced bunk. And this is a piece that is designed for tailoring on, cutting out all of your clothing and cloth.
And there's no way of improving on the design?
No, it's as simple as can be. Nice, large cutting surface and ample storage underneath. The schools like the Bauhaus and then modern Danish that pick up on it too also saw that likeness, the elegant design, really, that was inherent in
just
in
that fining down of proportions.
Exactly. I mean, you have the most perfect example of that is a chair that came from the Enfield, New Hampshire community. Literally so light that it can be picked up with one finger.
What does that weigh?
Probably about 5 pounds.
5 pounds.
And it's set back, again, it's totally refined. Flame finials. These were really the finest chairs that were ever produced in any of the Shaker communities. Something that adds to that overall effect, too, was that they came the seats. So you have even more air playing through it.
Even more transparency.
Exactly.
And a lot stronger than it looks.
Very much so. Someone over 200 pounds would not have a problem sitting in this chair or harming it.
Well, I'm not going to try it, but...
Take my word for it. Also something else, when we talked about inventions, this was a very practical Shaker invention, and you talk about form and function. People always are going to sit back in their chairs, no matter how you try not to.
So what are these?
So these are called tilters, ball and sockets. And it allows you to, indeed, tilt. And as you tilt, you see the chair does not actually move.
Ah, yes.
So you're not going to destroy the chair,
so it's not going to skid forward,
And probably you also won't go down with it.
We will sustain the structure, God's great and glorious plan, which He embraced.
These people have sustained the structure, kept intact their utopian vision of religious community. But the broad currents of American history rose around such ideas, isolating them. Their New Jerusalem of no mine or thine, no masters or servants, was the exact opposite of what by then had been created down south in Virginia. Here in Virginia, the Middleburg hunt keeps alive quite different English traditions. This was the outcome of another migration. The world of transplanted squirearchy, the Percys, Throgmortons, Wyatts and Spencers, mostly second sons or dispossessed gentry, the Royalist cavaliers who had lost out to the Puritans in England's Civil War. They wanted to recreate aristocratic privilege in America. They brought indentured servants and later African slaves. The top of the pyramid had to import its base. This is Mount Airy, seat of the Taylor family. Mrs. Taylor's forebears came here in the 1680s. But you never really lost your family never really lost its feelings of contact with England, did it?
No, indeed, we're all Anglophiles. Right now.
Yeah, what does the sort of idea of England, the mental picture of England, what does it mean to you?
It means a great deal to me because my grandmother taught me more about England than she did about America. I
Really?
could recite the kings of England and never did learn the president of the United States.
Oh, for shame.
Yeah. No. I loved England.
But did you ever live there?
No. I've only been there twice.
Early Virginia was a fantasy. Sir Walter Raleigh promoted it as a Garden of Eden, which aristocrats could colonize without having to lift a finger. Floundering through the salt marshes in embroidered doublets and silken hose, both his expeditions ended in disaster. Finally, in 1607, a kind of settlement did take hold in Jamestown. It was an anarchic dump where men died of starvation, swamp fever, and dysentery. This sickly colony was saved by a harsh doctor, Governor William Berkeley. He arrived in 1642 and set about re-establishing the aristocratic order of power and patronage. He recruited Royalist refugees desperate to leave Puritan England. These distressed cavaliers, as they were called, turned into the colonial oligarchy of Virginia. They were its first families. They were enticed here with free land and spectacular promises of privilege. They planted tobacco, or the sotweed as they called it. They got rich. One of the richest of all these clans was the Carters, who ended up owning scores of plantations, and this was one of them. It's called Shirley. Originally, this front drive used to be the back entrance, and visitors came to Shirley up the James River. When you first see it, you think of the homes of the English Georgian gentry. It started in 1723, a brick box with English Palladian porticos and pediments, topped off with a mansard roof built by French Huguenot carpenters. An odd hybrid which stares across the river with great assurance. Places like this weren't big by English standards, but in Virginia they were very grand indeed. The flying staircase framed a hall where formal dances were held. Virginians entertained lavishly, and one royal governor congratulated himself that there were no bad dancers in his administration. After the ball, they would retire to this parlour to gamble and gossip and perhaps to congratulate their late Governor Berkeley for banning free schools and printing presses. The Puritans had passionately believed in general education. The Southern Cavaliers were against it. It might disturb the hierarchy of class, at whose peak stood men like the patriarch of Shirley, Robert Carter, known as King Carter. He was the richest man in the colony. He owned 1/3 of a million acres and set up his very own church, Christ Church. This is one of the most elegant classical buildings of the early 18th century in America, but nobody knows its architect's name. Its detail is perfect, right up to that massive, slightly flared hip roof, cushioned on its cornice. Inside, it's just as good. The plan is a stubby cross with the altar at one end, and the light washing over those white barrel-vaulted ceilings gives it an almost Venetian effect, whose calm is emphasized by the thin, dark cornice line.